When I came to Lichfield, I found that my portrait had been much visited and much admired. Every man has a lurking wish to appear considerable in his native place, and I was pleased with the dignity conferred by such a testimony.
We cannot tell the precise moment when a friendship is formed. As in filling a vessel drop by drop, there is at last a drop which makes it run over. So, in a series of kindness, there is at last one which makes the heart run over. And so it was that I, James Boswell, met Samuel Johnson for the first time in a London bookshop. Little did I know that from this moment on, my life's work would be set, recording for posterity the life of this singular man, some 30 years my senior. Samuel Johnson's life would be one of the highest literary achievement, yet it could so easily have ended almost before it had begun, here in this very house. Shortly after his birth, the tiny Samuel contracted the disease known as scrofula, with terrible consequences. The child was almost blinded in his left eye, his right eye was also affected, and he was deaf in one ear. It was feared he would not live, but survive he did. Learning to read simple passages of prayer while still in petticoats. From his earliest years, Samuel Johnson showed the extraordinary determination that I recall so well in his later life. At 5 years old, so I've learned, a servant sent by his mother was late in collecting him from school, whereupon he decided to take himself home. So poor-sighted was he, the open sewer in his path such a hazard, he was obliged to crawl on his hands and knees to see it, and so avoid falling in. His worried schoolmistress wisely followed the fiercely independent child's progress from a distance, but to no avail. He became aware of her presence and flew back to her in a rage, striking out with his small fists. It would not be long, however, before Samuel found more productive use for his great energies. At the age of 7, he entered Lichfield Grammar School, and it was here, he told me, that his lifelong love for Latin and Greek literature was born. At home in his father's bookshop, Samuel's appetite for the English language was also voracious. As the years went by, he became entirely familiar with the works of our country's greatest writers. His breadth of reading would soon stand him in good stead, for, with the help of a small family legacy, he was able to enter Pembroke College, Oxford. It seemed just reward. Samuel was fond of recalling how, when his early tutor came to take leave of him, she brought him, in the simplicity of her kindness, a present of gingerbread, and said he was the best scholar she ever had. The compliment meant everything to Samuel, as high a proof of his merit as he could conceive. Entry to Oxford should have opened the door to the scholarly life Samuel so desired, but it was not to be. As a young student, my great friend enjoyed his academic life, but poverty followed him like a shadow. His father's bookshop had never provided good income for the family, and it certainly could not support Samuel's continuing presence at Oxford. Other students were sympathetic. One of them, I am sorry to say, rather too much so. A kind charity, in the form of a new pair of shoes, turned the pain of Samuel's humiliation into rage. Without money and without his pride, Samuel Johnson returned here to Lichfield. Work in his father's bookshop was an unhappy experience. He fell into a state of gloom and despair that was, in truth, a side of his nature he would never fully escape. One light in the darkness of this time in Samuel's life was one Gilbert Walmsley. A cathedral official, he would regularly entertain Lichfield's brightest young people at his dinner table in the Bishop's Palace. These evenings undoubtedly helped to sharpen the young Samuel's conversation, a gift I myself had the honour of enjoying so many times in his later years.
This one has its advantages.
But in those days at Lichfield, Samuel was still without the kind of literary work he craved. Moving to Birmingham, he finally began his career as a journalist and translator. Equally important, he met a widow named Elizabeth Porter. Tetty, as he called her, was some 20 years older than Samuel, with 3 children. "This is the most sensible man that I ever saw in my life," she said of Samuel, and their deep love would endure for the rest of their lives. Together they opened a school at Edgell Hall, just outside Lichfield, but sadly, after only a year they had to abandon their venture as it failed to attract enough pupils. However, one pupil became a lifelong friend. He was David Garrick, who would become the most famous actor of our time. Indeed, the two left for London together, where they were both to find fame in their own ways. In London, Samuel found an eager audience for his fine magazine articles, poems and essays. But it was an undertaking of epic proportion that would bring him his first real taste of fame. Samuel's great dictionary of the English language took him almost 10 years to complete. It was not the first dictionary, but by its use of quotations and its profound insight, it was by far the best. So superior indeed that I have no doubt it will remain the authoritative work of its kind for decades to come. The work was hard, but not, it must be said, stimulating. Indeed, as I recall, Samuel's own definition of dull was, "To make dictionaries is dull work." His scholarly endeavour did, however, bring him, to his great joy, an honorary degree from Oxford University, some 26 years after he had left that place in such sad circumstances. Samuel proudly recorded his academic award on the title page of the dictionary when it was published in 1755. So Samuel had achieved honour and celebrity, but not, alas, wealth. Although fortunately for Samuel, better days were just around the corner. At the age of 52, the King awarded Samuel Johnson a pension of £300 a year for his services to literature. Finally free from the spectre of debt, Samuel was able to indulge his love of company to the full. His presence as a member of literary clubs, at parties and at society dinner tables was in constant demand, where he would enthrall listeners with his peerless conversation and wit. His reputation was further enhanced when he was awarded an honorary doctorate from Dublin in 1765 and then Oxford in 1775, from whence he was often known simply as Dr. Johnson. And of course, Samuel continued to write tirelessly. Among his travels, many of them with my good self, he frequently returned to the town of his birth, saying on one occasion,
I lately took my friend Boswell and showed him genuine civilised life in an English provincial town. I turned him loose in Lichfield, that he might see for once real civility.
For all his life, Samuel kept a special place in his heart for Lichfield, the town that had played such a large part in nurturing the man he would become. The poet, the scholar, the journalist, the critic, the dramatist. To remember Samuel Johnson is to remember a great life. Troubled and sometimes anguished, yes, but ultimately unbowed by his tribulations. This was a compassionate, supremely witty man, a seeker of the truth and a champion of all artistic and literary values. When he died in 1784 and was laid to rest in Westminster Abbey, our country lost a great treasure, and I, James Boswell, lost my greatest friend.